Hello, my name is Havla Gianetta, and welcome to my sixth reading update for my GoFundMe campaign to help finish the nonfiction memoir that I'm working on. Today's excerpt that I'm going to be reading is from a high school trip to Eastern Europe, specifically Ukraine. I went there a couple times during the summers to do humanitarian work. And one of the things that I kept experiencing was prejudice against my skin color. Now, I'm a black and white biracial American, but I don't present as either black or white, and so I was often mistaken for being Romani or a gypsy, and I ended up kind of getting a chip on my shoulder about it because I got so used to the kind of overt racism that I began to expect it. And this is one of the memories for Ukraine where I thought it would be an issue, and it wasn't. So let's begin. I'm going to start with a quote from a Cher song. I was born in the wagon of a traveling show. My mama used to dance for the money they'd throw. Papa would do whatever he could, preach a little gospel, sell a couple bottles of Dr. Good. Gypsies, tramps, and thieves, we'd hear it from the people of the town. They'd call us gypsies, tramps, and thieves. And that's from the song Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves, written by Bob Stone for Cher. Our last Sunday service in Ukraine. I studied the sanctuary, distracted by the church's antique architecture as I waited to join the ceremony. I'd never been to a church where foot washing was part of the communion celebration before, but after attending multiple services without understanding most of what was being said, this symbolic act felt like a relief, a way to transcend the language barrier through touch. I stood with the other Americans in front of a row of chairs and buckets as a group of women in headscarves lined up in front of us and took off their shoes. Vika directed me to a chair, and I moved expectantly in front of it, towel in hand. But after a few moments, most of the other team members had already begun washing their congregants' feet, while the chair in front of me sat empty. I turned to see a tiny old woman standing still instead of moving forward. I waved at her, trying to look as welcoming as possible, but she remained in place. Vika, I called, turning to my translator. Yes, Havila. Is everything okay? I asked as I gestured toward the woman, knowing that it wasn't. One moment, Vika mumbled as her eyebrows creased with worry. Seconds later, she hurried over to the woman, and the two began vehemently arguing. Here we go, I thought as I looked up at the church ceiling. The Reverend had already chided me for taking communion at a church from a different denomination, and Colin berated me for not dressing like the other Americans because I had bandanas in my hair. I could only wonder what cross-cultural faux pas I'd committed this time. But as I turned to smile at the woman whom Vika was now struggling to push toward me, I realized what this hissy fit was probably about. The only obvious difference between me and all the other Americans visiting that church. I winced, fearing that the elderly Ukrainians were about to point at my skin in disgust and utter the one word I knew very well amidst the babble of unfamiliar phrases. Roma. Is everything okay? I asked again, praying for patience. It's fine, Khavila, Vika said reassuringly as she all but dragged the woman into the seat in front of me. I smiled at the woman again, then flushed in chagrin as she refused to meet my gaze. What is wrong with you? I screamed inside. God forbid that any of these white church ladies should have a brown gypsy girl touching them. I'm not Romani, and even if I were, my skin color is not some sort of disease. Just get over yourselves. But of course I couldn't say that out loud. Could you please, I growled, struggling to keep my temper in check. Please tell her that I am not a gypsy, Vika, please. I'm American, I blurted loudly at the old woman as I pointed to myself. I'm Amerikoi. Amerikoi. She does not think you're a gypsy, Vika explained uneasily. It's her feet. She has bad feet. Bad feet, I repeated incredulously. Then why agree to a foot washing ceremony if you don't want people touching them, lady? I rolled my eyes. Sure, it wasn't a race thing. Whatever, I sighed, annoyed that the other Americans were almost finished with their communion wash while mine hadn't even begun. Look, I don't care if her feet smell bad. Can we just get this over with? Vika shook her head. It's not the smell. Her feet are unformed, deformed, she faltered, shaping the air with her hands as she searched for the right word. She's afraid because she does not want you to see them. Okay, I sighed, unconvinced. But maybe having someone like me wash her feet would help change her mind about brown people. I knelt cautiously to the floor, bracing myself in case she spat at me or made signs against the evil eye like the women at the market had, and began gingerly untying her sneakers. She didn't resist, and as I peeled off her sweaty socks, a wave of compassion swept over me. The woman's hunched feet were raw and cracking, one of them bearing 6 toes, the other 7.5, and the extras weren't in line with the others. The half-toe jutted straight up from the center of her foot, and the extras protruded from its side. My anger melted away as I contemplated how painful it must be for this little babuthia, who lacked any access to surgical care or even orthopedic shoes, to jam her aching feet into those crusty sneakers every day. I looked up at her withered face and threadbare clothes, but she was too busy trying to wipe away tears from her eyes to pay attention to me. So I took her feet in my hands, grateful that I could offer this one act of kindness. And before I could stop myself, I leaned over and kissed each one before gently dipping it into the bucket and then caressing it dry with my towel. All right. Thanks so much for listening. That is my excerpt for today. If you'd like to donate, I'll include the link below. And my next reading should come up later this week.